Hello and welcome to Love Work Life Training Academy recruitment webinars, taking the perfect job specification. As people log in, I hope you can hear me. So if you can please drop a note in the chat or question and answer box, it'd be much appreciated. So I can make sure that you can hear me and I can obviously know that you're attending as well. As always, it's been a very busy day. I've had a very busy morning. I've had clients on the phone so far from America and from Australia. So I've been sort of internationally jet setting today. So it's been really good. So we're getting ready to work on from here. So let's have a quick sort of shout out of who's here this morning and who's on this afternoon, should I say, and who's on the call. So Premier Engineering Group are in, FJ Wilson are in, CRA Consulting are in, Impact Group are in, Jobwise are in, Truly Tailored are in, GP Recruiter in, MCS Group are in, Hall Recruitment are in, ARV are in, as always. Jim's on holiday, so I hope you're enjoying that. Jobwise are in, G2 Group are in, Eventus Legal are in, Advantage Resourcing, Invictus, Impact, Bonbon Languages are in, TaylorMade are in as well. We've got Change Recruitment. We've got, let's see, there's lots of people there from the Hotmail group. There is lots of people from TTS 24/7 are in. We have May and Stevens are in. And we have, again, Hall Recruitment. So it's quite a few people in this week, not as many as last week. I think that's maybe because this is always a contentious subject, taking the perfect job spec. It's always a bit of an interesting subject when we start to talk about what is the perfect job specification. And I am a firm and utter believer that the job specification is the most important piece of, or the most important document, the most important tool that you will have during your recruitment life cycle. If we get the right job specification and we get the right content in the job specification, it means finding candidates is so much easier, but also it gives us an opportunity to truly look at what conviction our client's giving us and why we should start working with that client. And so I think it's important as we start to talk about the job specification, we start to understand that if we just bypass most things and we just do what every other recruiter does, and that's take a bog standard generic job spec and think that will suffice, I think in the new world of work, we'll start to suffer as clients start to think, well, that's not good enough. But also, it's not now about the client, it's about the candidates. As we become a client-led market, and there are more and more candidates available to us on the marketplace, we need to be able to differentiate good candidates from bad candidates. And to be able to differentiate good candidates and bad candidates is going to be the difference between making a placement in this marketplace. I'm speaking to lots of agencies at the moment who are saying the same sort of thing over and over again, that their clients are telling them that they're going to recruit for themselves at the moment because there are so many candidates out there. But however, we all know that the amount of candidates that are now going to flood their inboxes is going to make it really hard for them to recruit and to recruit properly. So we've got to start to think, if we are recruiting properly for them and we're providing them with better candidates, it saves them time and it saves them money in more different ways than just the recruitment practice. So we've got to start to think about what we do when we talk about the recruitment process and what we do within that recruitment process. So let's kick off and let's work through this, taking the perfect job specification. So the objectives of today's courses is very, very simple from my point of view. Okay, I want to know your audience. I want you to know perfect planning part 1. What if the client sends you a job specification? Then we're going to plan part 2. Commitment, rules of qualification, the qualification process, know your client, candidate profile and duties, compensation, the recruitment process, sell and agree your solution, and obviously test your commitment right at the end. And it's important that we think about our sale. This job specification could come at any time during a sale. It could come just from the client sending you things. And I always say, if you have or you are part of a sale and you're talking about the needs of a client, then I would park the job specification until you get to the end of your sale and you've agreed terms and conditions, then go back into taking your job specification. And this is the taking the job specification part. So it encapsulates everything else that we've taught over the last 18 weeks. And this is how to sort of take that job specification properly. So the first part that we sort of move to is to know your audience. And I think it's really important that we start to understand what our audience actually looks like and what our audience is. Having identified that there's a job, you need to identify who in the company has the money, the authority, and the need to recruit. So we need to understand who the actual man in the marketplace is. So we need to speak to the man and be speaking to the man constantly. So the person that has the money, the authority, and the need to recruit. If we know that person, then that is what we're doing. More than working that requirement that's not been authorized, we need to make sure that we are having all our requirements authorized. So that means that need becomes really important. We need to make sure that we are speaking to the controlling power of the business to ensure that we're not working for free with zero chance of making a placement. And I'll say that again, most of the requirements that people work are on the contingency basis, and therefore we have minimal commitment. Irrespective of whether you think you've got a client that's working with you exclusive, etc., it is minimum commitment. So if we are speaking to the controlling power, and we know that that has been authorized, it's been signed off, and the need is genuine, then all of a sudden it increases our chances of actually getting to the end of the recruitment process. Because working for free without commitment hugely reduces your chance of making a placement. Zero chance in most cases. And we think about that as we place 2 out of 10 requirements that we take on the permanent market. That to me is a real big flag to say that most of our requirements that we work have poor commitment. So know your audience. If you're not speaking to the man, we need to start to think how I can get in touch with the man. Can my point of contact that I'm speaking to and who's giving me the job introduce me to the man? Because if they can, then what I'm going to find is I'm going to get a more business-focused conversation with the man. That means I can drive more commitment through the company because that person has more authority to do certain things within the company. So as we start to understand that, we need to start to plan. And I always think planning before we make a call is really important. And once you start to get better at a call, then your planning becomes better. But you've got to make sure you've got to be in the right frame of mind and you've got to have the right information in front of you before you make the call. Lots of clients complain, and we're going to do a webinar in the very near future with a client, and he is going to tell us exactly what he thinks of recruitment agencies. And let me tell you, it is not a polite conversation with him. And yet he talks to probably 20, 30 recruitment agencies every week. And every week he has the same comment about recruitment agencies. So what it says, if we can start to level up our interaction and level up our service to our clients, we'll get a far better interaction with our clients. And part of that is planning before we go onto the call. Get yourself in the right mindset to build rapport with the client. It is about service, service, service to the client. So before we're making our call, we need to have a plan, a roadmap that gets you from A to B, and you need to know your route. So you need to know who your target company is. And it's interesting when we speak to this client, how many times he speaks to a recruitment agent who doesn't really know their company. We need to know who the man is. So if I'm not speaking to the man, then I need to know who I should be speaking to. Okay. If I have to speak to someone further down the chain, fine. But then I need to find out who that person is. I need to know what the company does. Again, a very interesting comment from a client. How many agencies go on and speak to him, and he asks sometimes a simple question, do you know what we do? And they haven't a clue what they do. How rude does that sound? And again, if we're going in and saying, I'm a consultant, I'm a specialist, I'm an expert in this marketplace, if you don't know what that client does, then there's something radically wrong with your recruitment process. So you need to make sure that you spend some time looking at the client's website, looking at the person you're going to call on LinkedIn, looking to understand what that person does, know their skill sets, know what skill sets they actually need. And you can do that again by looking at LinkedIn, looking at the job boards, looking at their websites to find out what jobs they're advertising and what they're doing. So instantly you're getting an understanding of what that client's likely to need. And there you can start to preempt questions that you should be asking constantly. I always look for common ground. So again, using things like LinkedIn, I look for who they're connected with. I look for who I'm connected with, that they're connected with, and who could introduce me to that client to make it a better and stronger call if required. I also want to then have a conversation about those clients to see if I can use similar things that I've been using with those clients with this client. Would that tie them in? So I need to look for that common ground. So even when I'm taking a job specification, I sometimes think I know the client already. But if I'm taking a job specification and I know the type of client that has a similar candidate to this or a similar requirement to this, I can start linking those two together. Again, then I'm creating common ground and finding those type of people. I want to know my product inside and out. The client, even during a job specification, will start to talk to me about product. My product is candidates. So if I know my candidate marketplace inside out, and when I'm talking to the client through this job specification, and you start to name, I know a candidate that I'm working with at this moment that works at XYZ client, okay, you can start to link things together and bring things out. I also need to have, if I'm going on raw, so without having a conversation before, a really strong opening benefit statement. I need to be able to have a proper opening benefit statement with my client that I know exactly what my client wants and what to do. So when that opening benefit statement comes on, I know in that first 30 seconds, I can capture the client's imagination. I can capture the client's attention. I can capture the client's desire to want to talk to me more and expand the job spec. And I look at a job spec in a very simple way. A job spec gives me edges over my competition. So the more edges I have on my job spec, the more opportunity I have of finding the right candidate by design and not by luck. So that means if my client gives me a job spec and it's got 15 things on, when I go back and talk to my client about the job specification, if I walk away with 20 things on, it means when I do my searches and write my job adverts, I'm going to get a far better response or able to find far better candidates by design because I'm looking for everything rather than parts of things. And again, that's what I find great recruiters spend time taking and packing out a job specification. Those who are good at recruitment do it a little bit. Those that are poor at recruitment tend not to do it at all. So if you want to give yourself an extra edge over your competition, we really need to have a job spec. So part of my planning is always to have a job specification sheet that I'm going to fill out, irrespective whether the client has given you a job spec or not. I'm going to fill that sheet out. And the thing that I'm looking for as a manager is white space. If I find white space on my job sheet, it means I haven't asked all the questions that I need to ask for my client to get the right information to find the candidate. And we talk about clients a lot. I've done a lot of market research with quite a few of our partners just over the recent months. And one of the things that their clients have said and the top things that they want when we've analyzed them, one of them is they want to place the candidate first, not fastest. So in the first time, not the fastest time. How many times have we got 3 or 4 CVs over to a client, they've interviewed everybody and gone, actually they don't fit, they're not right. He has to then redo the job again. So the fastest candidates past the post don't always win. And the problem is because we haven't taken the proper job spec. So really what we do is spend our time now rather than in the later having to redo the job again. I'd rather do one search to find a set of candidates that fit their needs rather than have to do 2, 3 searches and repeat the recruitment process over again, because that's cutting into my investment time where I could be investing in more clients. So what if a client calls you that job specification? Always the same thing, okay? We should treat every job spec as if it's new. Every job spec as if you've never worked with the client before. And I don't really care if you've filled that job 100 times. We should always asking if anything has changed, always finding out has anything changed in that job specification. So every time we need to check what's different, because sometimes, and I sometimes look at this for clients, how many times have I received a Word document from a client? And that Word document is the job specification. And I go to save the job specification and I look at where that job specs come from, when it was formed, when it was actually built, which you can look at in Word. And generally what I find that job spec might be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. I found certain job specs 3, 4, 5 years old. Jobs change constantly. So if you've got a really old job spec, you need to update it and you need to work with your client to update it, because not everything changes, stays the same. So we've got to move on from those type of things and make sure we make that. So planning part 2 is really important. As I've said, what we need is we need to have a job specification sheet ready. We need to make sure there is no white spaces. So even if they sent a job spec to you, you could fill that white sheet out. And you could fill it out and look at the blank spaces, and they're the areas that we need to potentially grow and expand. We could look at other areas we know we need more information. They need to grow and expand. So having a job specification sheet ready is always important. You should always have a potential candidate in mind. Even if you're going on and doing a cold call with a client and the client then suddenly announces that they've got a job that they'd like you to work on, you should already be thinking about candidates, because you've already done your market research with that client, and therefore you should know the type of skill sets that they need. We need to plan for objections. You are going to get objections, and the main objection you're normally going to get is, why spend this time giving you more information about a job spec that I've already given you? We need to be able to overcome that objection, because remember, time is money. And if we're looking at how a client reduces their overall recruitment spend by spending an extra half an hour now, 45 minutes now, going back over that job specification, might save the client not just 45 minutes, but 3, 4, 5, 10 hours time, okay, that they're going to invest in the recruitment process not to find the right candidate. So plan for objections constantly so you can overcome those objections, because they will come even when taking a job spec. To find out why the client is recruiting. Rule 101 of recruitment. Why is the client recruiting? Agencies have this horrible habit of saying that every recruitment opportunity is a distressed purchase for the client. Well, I want you to think about that. The overall UK attrition rate before lockdown was between 15 and 20%, which only meant that the 100% of the recruitment they're doing that year is only 15% of it is going to be a distressed purchase. The rest of it are planned purchases. So we need to understand why they're recruiting. We need to look to build what I would always call the pain. Find out what their problem is and solve their problem. This is not about selling the features and benefits of recruitment until you know what their problem is. And taking a job specification is an opportunity to identify the client's problems so you can then solve that problem. We need to extract more information, as I've said, to gain an edge. And we need to have a drink ready, because it's going to be a long call. If you're going to do it by video, you need to prep your video and make sure you have the right things on your video. Make sure that your sound works. Make sure that you have a right background. Make sure that your kids aren't running around if you're at home working from home, as mine tend to do, or mine haven't grown up, but they still come in and annoy me. But we need to make sure we do the right things from there to make sure your video prep is really important. We need to make sure that also that you're picking up things on your client, because if they're going to do video interviewing, look at how the client is acting on the video. It's an opportunity to coach and build a better and stronger relationship with your client. So it's about creating urgency. Time to fill is important. and you build urgency now in your mind, and it creates more urgency in your client's mind. We need to build the pain to make sure that we come in as the shining knight in armor, curing their problems. So we need to make sure that we're doing the right things all the way through. So as we move forward, commitment now is the important part. When we've got lots and lots of candidates out there in the marketplace looking for jobs, having more commitment from your client is ultra important, because every time your client puts the phone down, it's going to ring again, and it's going to be another agent asking if they've got requirements. So what do you need the client to commit to when we first call to take a job specification? To think about what the client is going to commit to, okay? We need to commit to give you time to take a full job specification. You need to build that job specification out. You need to find everything you need to know to help you find the right candidate the first time. No matter how good the job spec is that the client's given you, there is always more to learn. And if the client's not committed to spend time with you now so you can understand their role, why should you commit time to them to find people, for only then to have to commit that time again when they reject the candidates because they're not quite right to them? So we need to make sure that we commit, and they commit as well, to take a better and more in-depth job spec. To face-to-face meeting with a client to take the job specification, especially on perm, is the best way. If we can do that now by video content, then even better, because it saves your time and reduces your carbon footprint. Okay, so meeting clients face to face, you can see more things. You can understand the client in greater detail by meeting them face to face. Okay, you'll get an understanding of what the client's environment's about. Okay, by visiting the client. You sometimes can't get that by video, but you can make sure that you can see how much commitment the client is giving you. How passionate are they about the job? Are they able to sell the role via video? When you do that, can you lead the client to undertake a video interview and bring that spec to life whilst on that video? And when you're talking to the client now, taking that job specification, this is a great opportunity to think a little bit different to our competition. If we can video the client giving us a job specification and talking about the job specification, we can start taking snippets from the video that we have created and sending those snippets to our candidates, showing the passion the client's got, showing what the client is actually talking about. We can introduce a different style of recruitment where it's more interactive, where the client now is actually selling the job specification to the candidate there and then via video. And we can use that absolutely, constantly, throughout the recruitment process. So it's not just about using the video now for an interview process. We can do it for the taking the job specification process. I wish I could speak today. Okay. The client wants to be welcoming feedback on the position. Remember, you are an expert in the marketplace. You are the expert here, and you have your fingertips on a huge amount of data. And if you can extract that data, then it means you can start to go about instructing the client on how they can improve their process. They may be asking for too much money. They might be asking for too little money. They might be looking for skills that don't exist. They might be looking for candidates that are rare. They might be looking for candidates that are abundant in the marketplace. But if you can use that data to help the client improve their recruitment process, it is really, really important, because it helps build your relationship. It helps build what I would all class as your stickiness with a client. So a client that doesn't welcome your feedback, or doesn't welcome your interjection about what the market's looking like, are they really committed to you? Are they really committed to understanding the problems that you may face based on their ill-equipped job specification? We want the candidate to accept alternative suggestions. So if we're suggesting different things, will the client understand what they are and be willing to change their job specification? We want them to only receive candidates that can do the role. And when I mean that, that means finding the job specification that gives me a candidate that is a 95% plus match to the job. That way, we're going to cut down the amount of speculative CVs we send in that do not match the job spec whatsoever, and potentially do not match the client whatsoever. It also means that they will fill the job first time, not in the quickest time. And that's an important comment, to fill the job first time, not in the quickest time. Because generally when they try and push for speed and fill it in the quickest time, what happens is they get the wrong candidates that look good, interview them, and then they have to repeat that interview process again. So it's almost that doing it twice constantly because they haven't taken the opportunity to commit early doors. You want them to be booking first and second interviews on this call. Again, to put commitment to yourself and commitment with themselves, but also then to make sure that when you're speaking to candidates, you're committing the candidate as well. We need to make sure that they're willing to compromise on their recruitment solution, because is their recruitment solution fit for purpose? As we've spent the last 4 or 5 months reviewing our recruitment processes for when the market changes to look at what we can do, so will the client. But guess what? How often have we invited into our recruitment meetings about how we're going to do our recruitment process a client? Never. And how often does a client come into, go into the client's meetings? Never. So we need to add our expertise here and try to help them change their recruitment process, because the number one thing that all clients said they want to do was to streamline their recruitment process. The second most important thing to them was to make sure that the candidate had a far better journey. So they need to be able to compromise on their recruitment solution so we get a better opportunity to find the right candidate and not waste our time. So there are qualification rules. Okay, and what are the rules of qualification? Okay, if the client sends you a job specification, you still need to qualify it. You still need to look over it and work from there. Clients sometimes don't truly have a clue what they're looking for, so we need to educate them. We need to find out what they are truly looking for, not what they think they are looking for. And there is a distinct difference in those two. And it's very interesting when I've gone on to a client and I've started to expand the job spec, how many sudden things come into their mindset about what they genuinely need and what they want, and what extras they could add, or what things they could potentially take away. Because then you suddenly start to identify what they truly need rather than what they think they need. And there is a big difference. By the end of the qualification process, you need to have the perfect job specification, a job specification where you feel that you've got commitment and you can feel that you've got the right opportunity to fill that job. We need to make sure that we are not working and wasting our time. We need to make sure, as the rules of qualification, that we have our interview process booked in during that process. If you're not booking it in during that process, your client lacks true commitment to your recruitment process and lacks true commitment to you as a recruiter. Do they value your skills? Do they value your capability to bring the right candidates to them in the timescales that you're talking about? If you haven't got that commitment, why are you committing to the client? It is about driving a two-way street, okay, and making sure both parties are committed to each other on that street. At the end of the qualification process, you need to agree terms and conditions and have them signed. Too many clients are backdooring clients and candidates at the moment. It's become more of a thing because clients understand that if they haven't signed their terms and conditions, perhaps they can get away with it. But again, why are you working on a role that hasn't got terms and conditions signed? The client, again, is lacking that commitment to work with you. You need a plan of action and confirm that plan with your client. And to me, they are the rules of qualification. If you follow all those rules and do all those things during qualification, when you start to work the requirement, you've got a far better chance of filling the requirement. So the qualification itself, we've got to think about the qualification and what that means. Do you have a process to qualify your client to ensure you optimize your opportunity to work the requirement? So as I said, have you got a job specification form? Have you taken the client's details? Have you got a true candidate profile? Do you understand what the top 3 things that that candidate is going to be doing daily in their job, which is very different to the top 3 skills that the candidate actually needs? And sometimes this is where what a client thinks they want to what they actually want starts to differ, because sometimes what their duties disappear into is something different to the skill sets that they require. So I always find out the top 3 things that they do daily, because that's the most important things that they do constantly. Is that their priority skills that you're looking for? Have a strong business process to work by and apply it. And that means having defined walk-away points and defined objectives that you need to live by to make sure that when you get a requirement, you are not wasting your time. And again, I'll repeat the stat. We fill 2 out of 10 requirements in the UK on permanent that we take on. That means 80% of your time working requirements isn't going to yield a fee. 80% of your time is not going to yield a fee. Why are we working in that manner? If we could swap that stat round, we'd be making hundreds of placements. So we've got to start to think about the clients that waste our time because we haven't got a process of qualification, and nor do we commit to that process and walk away when we need to walk away. So we need to know your client. Okay, we need to know your client inside out. You need to make sure that it sounds very simple, the information that we need to know. You need to know your client inside out. You need to be able to know and understand what your candidate pool looks like compared to your client portfolio. If your candidate pool and your client portfolio start to match, you've got a better opportunity of finding a candidate quickly and efficiently. If you're forever finding new requirements and different niches, what you're doing is reinventing the recruitment wheel over and over again, because you're going to have to find new candidates over again. If you want to find candidates quickly and efficiently, they're on your database, they're on your CRM. So the more niche you work, or the more geographically tight you work, and the more you know that candidate marketplace, then the easier it is. So the more you know your client inside out, you should know where your candidate marketplace fits for that. You need to know your manager's name, number, and mobile and email address. We also need to know who else that we can contact. How many times do we find clients disappear on us and we haven't got another contact number for them? We haven't got all their numbers for them. We haven't got anyone else that we can talk to them. So we need to make sure that we are mapping everything. So contact names, numbers, email addresses, and who else they can contact just in case. We need to make sure why and understand why the client actually works for the company. That's an interesting comment, why the client works for the company. If we understand why the client works for the company, it will give you valuable insight on the company. It will also demonstrate how well you are, or how well not, in some cases, the client will be able to sell the company to your client, to your candidate, sorry. So you need to educate the client sometimes on this. So understanding why the client works for your company and how effervescent, how exuberant they are about why they work for a company will tell you how well they'll be able to sell that company to your candidate when that candidate gets into the interview process. So knowing things like the size of the company, the turnover of the company, the location, the headcount, etc., gives you an opportunity when you start to speak to the candidate about how you can grow that candidate's mindset about working for that company. And I remember speaking to certain companies and thinking they were small, medium companies, not very big, and then suddenly finding out they're huge and part of a huge organization. So sometimes you're surprised by who actually owns the company and what's going on. So understanding the size of the company and turnover and things like that is really important. Understanding your management team is really important. And there's different ways that we want to understand the management team, the manager's team. Okay, we want to understand the perm and the contract or temp opportunity. We want to understand what their growth opportunity is. If it's a big team, what's their attrition rates? Therefore, how many more potential openings will there? What's their growth strategy for this year? So how many new placements are they going to place in there? If they've got contract or temp working there, how much of their team is made up of contract and temp? Is that a different opportunity that we can sell with them or to them? So often missed, it's obvious to ask these type of questions, but it's very, very missed sometimes because we just expect them to understand, or we expect to understand that they've got a fairly big team. So we need to think, knowing the inside out of that means we can now sell that back to candidates and use that information for candidates. We need to know why the job has come about, what we said early on, because it helps to build the pain. What problems can you solve for the client? What problems has the client got? Is it if the candidate can't be placed soon, then they're going to be under pressure from their client? Is it because someone's left, so it is a distressed purchase? Is it because their growth strategy says they need this person and they can't grow without this person, etc.? Why has the job come about? And the last thing that we should ask, but very seldom ask and often missed, is the number of positions that are open. How many times have I had a client say, find me this type of candidate, you've got to go and find that candidate, and then suddenly said, great, I wouldn't mind taking another 2 of these candidates. And we've only thought about 1 position. So always find out the number of positions that are open. Sounds simple, but is very often forgot. We need to find out the candidate's profile and duties. And this is really important. We need to find out what you need to know about the candidates that the client requires. And I was finding out the job title starts to give me lots of information. Okay, the job title starts to tell me what level of the candidate we're starting to look for. I want to understand the desirable skills, the essential skills, the nice to have skills, so I can separate these skills out, which means that if I have to start to negotiate with the client or the candidate, I can start to negotiate on skills, desirables, and nice to haves and flex things up and down, especially when we start salary. We need to start to understand that. And you think, I've got now options that I can trade. I could trade a desirable skill for a nice to have, or could I bring a different desirable skill in that will complement an essential skill that the client might have not thought about? I need to start to think about the 3 skills the candidate will use every single day, because sometimes they're very different to what a client thinks is essential and what is desirable and what is nice to have. So those 3 skills that they use every single day now becomes a really crutch point within the recruitment. It's what you're going to prop your recruitment strategy up by understanding that. It also means when you're selling to the candidate and to the client, you can bring those skill bases into action constantly. I want to know the most important daily activity that the candidate does, because I want to know what they are doing every single day. That way, again, I'm increasing the appetite I can create for my candidate to want to join the company, and therefore I can solve the client's problem by having a candidate that does those things well. So that starts to create a full role description. But what I also need, because clients have a tendency of hiring on skills and firing on behaviors, what lockdown has brought to the client's attention is their behavioral profiling and their behavioral matching of skills isn't brilliant. Hence why they're getting rid of lots of employees who don't behave like they want to. So the type of person now becomes really important. We want to know the soft skills required. Are they a team player? What communication skills do they need? If the team size is quite big, how are they going to fit into that team? Where do they fit in that team? What's their promotional opportunity? What's their career opportunities in there? We need to think about all of those things. And the final thing that I always think about is training. What training can they have, had already, that they can take to the client? And what training is the client going to provide to them that will whet that candidate's appetite? Training is a really big key motivator for people to move and join a new company, to learn new skills or develop existing skills. If you've noticed, what I've not talked about here is compensation. I've talked about what's in it for me, for the candidate, from a job point of view. I want the candidate to feel the fear of missing out, that this is a brilliant job and they're going to miss out because of the job. So I've not talked about money. I want to get their desire and interest absolutely right by having these skills absolutely nailed down. So my client needs to understand that this is a very different process. It's a more in-depth process because I want to get the right candidate first time, not in the quickest time. So compensation then does come in. So I want to know what we're going to do, okay? Think what was important 20 weeks ago and what's important now and how timescales has changed. compensation isn't going to be as important as the skill set that we've just gone through and what the client can do for them. But compensation is still going to be relatively important. And time changes as we go from being a client marketplace to a candidate marketplace. So what do we need to know about the compensation package? I always say salary or rate, maximum they can pay, and what they are paying now. And there's very two different rules there. So they might be saying we're paying our people now 45k, but they might want to get up that to 50k. They might want to reduce that depending on what's coming in. So you need to understand that. Again, when we talk about contracts and temps, what are they paying their temps now? What should they be paying their temps, etc. So we need to understand salary and rate. We need to understand the maximum they can pay. And once we get the maximum they pay, we need to ask the simple question. If I find a candidate that has all the skills and they want 5% more than your maximum, can you go to that 5% more? Let's see how much they can stretch their budget by. Because we can understand how they can stretch their budget by, then we can start to stretch them completely. Bonus and commission. If there is bonus and commission on a permanent side, how often is it paid out? And if it was paid out, and what percentage is it paid out? It's often talked about bonuses and commission, so we need to understand how often it's paid and when it's paid. Holiday entitlement is always an interesting one, what their pension scheme is like, what their training schemes are like, and now in the modern world of working, is there flexible working out there? What's that like? I need to understand that, because if they have flexible working and working from home, how does that affect anything else that we put in touch with the candidate? Okay, does it affect salary, bonus, etc.? Could I trade that flexible working for salary or bonus, etc.? So we're now starting to build a better profile that we can start to flex to find a better candidate. And sometimes they will offer things like car, gym, etc., etc., etc. So what else can they offer? The more about that compensation package that we know, the more, again, we can create desire for the candidate. But how often do you take a job specification and all you get is the salary or the rate, nothing else? So we need to make sure we know everything, because how many times will a candidate ask you all of these questions and you then have to go back and speak to the client? To get this first time, every time. So the recruitment process. Again, we follow a process, okay? What is your client's recruitment process? What is their process? And the question is that process fit for purpose? Can we help the client improve their recruitment process? Can we make their recruitment process more streamlined? If we can make it more streamlined, we start to reduce the overall cost of recruitment, which is 98% of every client's driver in the next 12 months, to reduce their overall cost of recruitment. And note, what they said was not the recruitment fee or rate. What they said was their overall cost of recruitment. And the majority of the cost of recruitment isn't in the fee that they're paying, it's in the way that they work and the time they take away from their job. That is the bigger cost of recruitment. The cost of recruitment of putting a bad hire in is astronomical compared to the fee that they pay us. So if we can get it right first time and give them a better due diligence on or a better understanding of the candidate, so they can do more due diligence on that candidate, the better it will be. So understanding their process and is it fit for purpose is really important. What have they done to date? Have they advertised it themselves? How many CVs they've got? How many candidates interviews have they had? Okay, why has the process not succeeded? We need to understand these type of things, because clients will go out and start to recruit for themselves. So if they said, oh, I've got 100 people already in the process, we need to understand why those 100 people aren't right, why they are rejecting them. Is it because of they haven't got the time to look through all of those people? Is it because their job advert is poor, etc.? So we need to create realism and create urgency so we understand what's going on. So what have they done to date is important. If you're suddenly finding out they've got loads of interviews and had loads of interviews and rejected everybody, the question is why? What are they missing? Why are candidates turning them down, or why are they rejecting candidates? Because that means we might have to go back into our job specification and readdress certain things in our job specification if we don't understand that. We need to talk to the client about a sourcing strategy, how we are going to go to market and what we are going to go to market like. How we're going to speak to our candidates, what we're going to tell our candidates about the client, what does the client want us to tell about the client, have we got some marketing material from the client that we can send to our candidates, etc., etc. Now we're talking, do we have a video? Now we've got video job specs, etc. What is the sourcing strategy? What is it going to be doing? Okay, and if we understand what the sourcing strategy is, then we can start to talk to the client back about what our sourcing strategy is. Certain candidates that we already know that we're going to approach, certain clients that we're going to headhunt out of, why we're approaching those type of clients, etc. How are we going to go to market? Let's make this a proper view so they can understand what we do, because most clients just think we put an advert on a job board, we wait for candidate's response to come back, and we send a CV to that candidate, when we know that isn't true. So talking to the client about our sourcing strategy and telling them what we are doing is really important. We need to look at the CVs required, the numbers required, and the feedback dates that we have in process. We need to start looking at the interview dates booked as well. Have we got them booked in the right place? Book them in now with your client, again, to drive commitment. We need to understand what the interview process is. The number of interviews, the questions, who will be there? Will it be face-to-face? Will it be over the phone? Will it be via video? How do we interact with that? If it's face-to-face, can we bring the candidate down? Can we do a face-to-face interview in our office and bring all the candidates in and make sure the client then is off-site and drive that? If we can do it by video, do we go onto the video first and foremost and introduce the client to the candidate to each other and then leave them to go to the interview? What can we add to that interview process that helps us recruit the next time? We need to create a really good feedback process, and we need to talk to them about our counter offer process and our offer process to make sure they understand what we're going to do once we get an offer and what we expect from them as the client in the bare minimum. How many requirements and potential placements have I lost because the client has been slow on sending out a contract, slow and sending out the terms and conditions, etc. So I need to know what's going on that all the time. I need to know what if, the implications of not recruiting this person is. So again, I'm going to flip back into the pain process. If we don't find the right person, what is the implications on you? Let's start to screw the intensity of this role and the power and the pressure that the client is going to feel by not filling this role. And if we can start to do that and then start to find the right candidates, it creates desire to see the candidate and desire to fill the role. So that what if is really important. And then we need to understand what we can trade with the client. And that's really important when we start to think about, this job specification here, Mr. Client, looking at my market knowledge, you're not going to find this person for that salary. However, if you start to trade on this type of skill, you might get more people for that. Looking at this, Mr. Client, you're not paying enough or you're overpaying. Looking at this, these skills don't exist in the marketplace. However, I can get skills like this and this, which will complement that, but this bit here you're not going to get. But for that, it's a reduced salary, or you might have to pay more. Whatever it is you're talking about, you've got to understand, you've got to trade it. Because when we start to talk about agreeing our solution, what we can trade now becomes important, because they will start to push back on our services and try to reduce our fees. But if they're not willing to reduce their overall job specification or alter their job specification based on our intelligence and our data, then we've got to start to think about who controls the process. Because if the client's controlling the process and we're not, we're in problems, we're in trouble. So selling our solution is really important. Selling our solution is absolutely needs to be done every time we take a job spec. So what do we need to consider? Now you have all the facts, give feedback to the clients on their issues and their potential needs. So give them genuine feedback about whether you can find this person, whether they're paying the right money. Give them a true consultative view of your market understanding based on the position that they are looking for. If we can see what they're looking for and we can see things that are having problems with, we can start to change that. So suggesting ideas and agreed changes in their recruitment strategy now becomes really important. If you want to create a better recruitment strategy with them, we have to work with them. But they also have to understand where their recruitment strategy is causing a problem and what that problem looks like from our point of view, the agency, but more importantly, from the candidates, because it's the candidate's journey here that's really important. So suggesting changes to the recruitment strategy is really important. Propose your full service, starting with retained, then exclusive, then contingency. So talk about your full service. We talk about our service. This is the services that we provide, Mr. Client. And what I want to talk to you about then is what service do they think would be best to fill the job. Now, they may turn around and say, well, I really think retained is best. And you might turn around and say, well, actually, Mr. Client, I think I've got candidates that can fill this job already, so I'll do it exclusively with you. Okay? You may turn around and say, Mr. Client, this job is almost unfillable. Okay, so I'm going to have to do a really head-hunting position, okay, and spend some time really working into the marketplace. To retain me on that process, you need to pay a retained fee. You might find that you know hundreds of candidates that can fill that job. And if they're going to give you exclusively, can you fill it on a contingency basis? So you need to propose your full service. But what we're saying to the client is, this is what I recommend. Listening to what you want, these are the full services. Ask the client what they want. If they say this, you can then say, well, that's within my recommendation as well. Brilliant. If they say, I want a contingency service, you can then start to recommend an exclusive or retained service based on what they want. It's now being more consultative rather than just giving your services and then give your price. So get them to tell you what they want first, then propose your full fee. Propose it, shut up. Say nothing, let them come back to you with their thoughts. If they think long and hard about it, okay, they might come back and just accept it. They might come back and want to change it. If they want to trade it, then we look to trade our variables, one at a time. And it's so easy, and I've seen this so often. You know, you go to a client, you'll pitch a 20% fee for a perm, or 20% margin. And the client says, no, every other agency is on 15%. And instantly we drop our pants and go to 15%. But we've just talked about retained, exclusive, and contingency. He's expecting us now to deliver all of those type of things to our clients, okay, but now at a contingency fee. So we've got to think about what we can trade, what we can take away from the client. And once the client starts to trade variables, we can go, right, let's look at our service, Mr. Client. You talked about an exclusive service. This is what we said we give you for exclusive service. What part do you want me to take out of our exclusive service to maybe reach your fee? Once you start to take things away from the client, they start to realize that. When I pitch to clients, I send a pitching document to my client, and in my pitching document, I list all my services. And when they come back and say, I want to do this type of service with you, okay, but I only want to pay this price, I'll go back and say, well, which part of my service will I take out? And they suddenly realize that it comes all in one. And 90% of the time, I get my fee. I get my rate because I'm not trading my variables. If I have to trade down, then fine, but I will always get something in return for that trade. If you have a candidate that you know is right for that job and you've already talked to them and you've preempted them, present that candidate now to the client, because presenting it now to the client does two things. They are on the phone now and they can review that candidate. It shows that you really understand your marketplace. The second thing it does, though, that's more important, the client has a chance to review that candidate's skill base, and they may then identify certain things that might be wrong with that candidate. But if you haven't got those things that are on your job specification, you can now add them into your job specification. So too many people never present a candidate at this stage where the client is thinking exactly about what they want. Here's a brilliant candidate, have a look at this, see what you think, does it match? Well, actually, no, it hasn't got this, it hasn't got that. You get a far more now in-depth understanding of your job specification and what your client needs. When we sell and agree, we need to re-agree our interview dates. Okay, we need to recap the compensation. We need to reconfirm the whole process, and we need to sell our actions. Set our actions of what's going on, and I always write to a client after I've agreed something, highlighting what the expectations are from each individual party. Once I've set my expectations, I'm there to hit. I never, ever overpromise and underdeliver. I always underpromise and overdeliver. But I don't underpromise by too much. I underpromise slightly, but then work hard to really overdeliver. And as I say, I always get everything to agree in writing ASAP. Now, we talk about testing our commitment. Okay, and I always think about testing our commitment in a whole host of ways. And I always think about testing our commitment is really important. But again, it's one of the least parts that we do, because really our testing our commitment can be done before working the role, what we need, but also it should be done after the role. We've taken the role, we've put the phone down, now we need to speak to ourselves. So we need to stop, breathe, and think. Do I have the client's full commitment? Do I genuinely believe that I've got the client's full commitment, or am I just masking this myself because I want to hit a KPI number? If I just want to hit a KPI number, then fine, it's easy to do. But what you're actually doing is committing yourself to work a job because now your manager thinks you've got the perfect job, and you're committing yourself to work that job, okay, which you probably know in your hearts of hearts isn't truly going to happen. So stop, breathe, and think. Have you got full commitment? I want to know, can the role be filled? And if I can fill the role, great. If I can't fill the role, I've got to consider, why am I working this role, especially if it's contingent. If it's a retained basis, okay, then that's a whole different thing, because they're going to engage me for me to go and find that marketplace and give market information to the client, which might then mold the spec in a later date. But I want to know, can I fill the role? Even if it's exclusive, there's no point getting exclusivity if you do not believe you can fill the role. Because guess what? You probably won't fill the role. So we need to really understand, can the role be filled? If not, what can we do with the job specification that will make it easier to find a candidate? I grade every single role that I worked, okay? And I had a grading system, okay? So I always graded 1 to 10, and if my role wasn't above a grade 8, I wouldn't work it because I hadn't got the full commitment. So to me, a grade 10 role was retained, fully committed and fillable. I didn't take the role on a retainer, or I wouldn't take a role on a retainer if I couldn't fill it, because what I wanted to do was explain to the client that I'll take this on a retained basis, but what I'm telling you now is a chance of filling it is poor, but I'll give you market information, and what you're paying me for is to actually provide you with market information so we can then address the requirement a little bit later. So fully retained roles that are fillable, absolutely get them retained. Take a retainer on to give market information, but do not promise that you can fill the role, and explain that why to your clients. And then it was exclusive with full commitment and committed, and then exclusive but lack commitment, but not sure about the candidate base. And when I say lack commitment, okay, the client has given you exclusive, but you're not 100% certain whether the client truly is exclusive, and you're not sure about your client base. I then started working on 7, a contingency role that is fully committed, fillable, but you've got quite a few competitors. Okay, so I potentially would think, how do I get that to an 8? How do I drive that up? Okay, and then it went weaker and weaker down the line. So I would always make sure that I've got a role that above 8. If I've got a role that is a 7, a 6, or a 5, how can I upsell that role? How can I gain more commitment to make it work for me, so I'm investing my time wisely? Are you confident in your proposal? Okay, can you and will you fill it? If there's any doubt, you need to seek a second opinion. So to conclude, we need to think, do you know your audience? Do you know your man? Have you got a plan? are you willing to stick to your plan? Do you know what to do if your client sends you a job specification? And do you know what commitment looks like? Do you know what to ask for when taking a requirement? Which means if you've got your rules of requirement in place, that you know that you should be talking about the client, the role, the candidate, and the compensation in that type of order, to understand what your client actually does, understand what the role is required, understand what type of candidate they need, and what compensation they're going to pay. Do you have agreed a recruitment process, and have you tailored their process to your needs? Have you sold and agreed your solution? And can you gauge if you can and will fill the role? If you know you can't fill the role, or you know there's so much competition, you're just never going to commit yourself. And if you're not committing yourself, then there's the problem. You now know, or you're now set to work a requirement because you know whether you can fill that requirement or not. So you've now got to think the choices that you have and the difference now taking a job spec than what it was 20 weeks ago. You need to be more precise. You need to have full and utter confidence in yourself that you can fill the role. And you can only have that confidence in yourself if your client has given you full commitment to fill the role. So if you don't want to waste your time, okay, and you want to start to increase your requirement to placement ratio, then you've got to work better at your job specification stage in the first place. Ladies and gents, thank you very much for your time. That's the end of today's session. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop some questions down to me. As always, if you want something next week, again, this was a request from 2 clients this week that want me to go over because they've been taking new job specs on the last couple of weeks, and they found that their consultants were not maybe taking the best job specification they could. So if you want something for next week, feel free to email me. Ladies and gents, I say, if you've got no more questions, that's much appreciated. Thanks very much for your time. It's been a very quick an hour again, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you very much.